As an adult, don't we all miss spring break? Nothing like taking a week off from all your responsibilities. Well, here's the next best thing for adults, a spring break from house payments. SaveWithConrad.com can help you get rid of all your credit card debt, just like that. We're routinely helping our listeners save $5, $6, $7, even $800 a month. And you don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket to do this, but check this out, no house payments for 2 months. At SaveWithConrad.com, NMLS number 2129, Equal Housing Lender. SaveWithConrad.com. Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grillin' JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Jim, how are you, man?
Connie, I couldn't be better. It's great to hear your voice. Good to be talking to all the fans out there. We appreciate their support here in our podcast. Grillin' JR is growing leaps and bounds. Great advertisers, great people that are helping us out. But the most important people we know are those ones that are listening right now.
But our topic today, Royal Rumble 2000. I got to tell you, Jim, when this one appeared on the docket, I was really, really excited. This is one of my absolute favorite Rumble shows. I know lots of our listeners really favor 1992 as their favorite Rumble match. I actually prefer the 97 Rumble match itself, just a little bit better than 92. But the rest of the card here for Royal Rumble 2000, I think is hard to beat. I think outside of the Rumble match, it might be my favorite Rumble ever.
A lot of talent. We were deep in talent, even though we didn't have Austin healthy at that time. It seemed like a lot of the guys saw opportunity when Steve had his neck surgery. A lot of guys saw opportunity to move up the card because he left a gaping hole when he got sidelined. So it was an interesting time of transition, but we had some big-time players ready to go play in that manner, including Triple H, Mick Foley, for sure, and, of course, the great one, The Rock, had assumed his place at the top of the card, with the Stone Cold being in San Antonio recovering from his neck surgery. So interesting time, and everybody came to play big. And look, Conrad, the bottom line of that is, still one of Stone Cold's puns, it was the Garden. And no matter what anybody says, all the cool kids that are wrestling, oh, the Garden is another venue. It's not another venue. And if you're a pro wrestler and you look at the Garden as another venue, you need to get your ass out of the business. You need to go back to wherever you came from and do wherever you can be a big star, because the Garden is the Garden, the world's most famous arena for a good reason. So I think the Garden had a big hand in the overall performance of that show. And it had some moments on it that I think people were not expecting that we'll talk about, but it was a good show from start to finish. Some of the finishes, you can always second guess those. We do every week here, and everybody else does every day at someplace else, but damn, man, it was a good show. You're right. It was one of the fun shows to do. Lawler and I were the American broadcasters, American English-speaking broadcasters, or Southern speaking, and I enjoyed that show with Jerry. It was a full night's work, man. The Rumble itself was a load, so it was really cool. I'm glad we're doing this show today, and I think the fans will say the same thing when they are through hearing about it, and hopefully they've watched it, or they can watch it right now, whatever. But nonetheless, it's a cool show.
It is a cool show, and you talked about the importance of Madison Square Garden. This is the first time that a Royal Rumble has been held in Madison Square Garden. The next one would be 2008, but this is the very first time, and it's also the first time that $1 million gate had happened for the WWE at Madison Square Garden, which I guess when you think about it, it seems like it should have probably already happened, but just with the way they were scaling and pricing tickets, this is the first time it happened. Of course, today, everybody's talking about this show because it is the exact 20-year anniversary of this show. It drew in a sellout capacity crowd, 19,231 fans, 16,629 of those paid a gate of $1,142,540, which means it is the 6th largest gate for a pro wrestling event ever in the United States. It broke the WrestleMania 10 mark of 960,000. There's also 157,000 sold in merch, a banner day for WWE. And when you think about all the stadium shows and all the dome shows, it's pretty remarkable that at the time it was the 6th largest gate ever.
Yeah. And a great accomplishment for the team. And of course, again, being in the Garden full is extraordinary, because you can walk the halls back in the locker room area and see all these pictures of people that have played there, performed there. It's pretty incredible to know that you're there where Muhammad Ali fought, for where Frank Sinatra sang. Every major music group in the history of the world seemingly has played the Garden or wanted to. So it was all the stars aligned well, and I thought the guys had a great night, and they got paid well for that show. I mean, it did well on the pay-per-view market. And of course, you said $1.1 million on gross ticket sales ain't shabby.
And it's even remarkable to think that you're doing this with Austin on the sidelines. You may remember that Survivor Series 99, you guys did an angle where Austin was hit by a car. It really is just to cover up the fact that he's going to have to get neck surgery. So he's on the sidelines here. Meltzer would actually talk about that, saying Austin switched his surgery from January 11th in Cleveland to a new team of doctors in San Antonio, headed by Dr. Lloyd Youngblood, on January 17th. And he would also say that he has an 8mm gap for his spinal cord. He should have an 18mm gap. So we've got a real issue here where we've got a large spur and a neck protrusion that's now compressing the spinal cord. It's going to put him in significant jeopardy of some sort of spinal cord injury. So it needs repair. But Youngblood is a guy that we would hear about a lot in wrestling. Is Austin the first guy to make the pivot, and then everybody sort of followed suit?
I think so. I think Dr. Youngblood, who I got to know a little bit because I was down there frequently, it seemed like anyway, frequently. He's a hell of a guy, a big strapping doctor who looked like to be an athlete at some point in his lifetime. And the reason I say that is that he could better understand Steve's mentality. And of course, like any great athlete, you always looking over your shoulder at when Father Time's going to tap you on the shoulder and say it's over. And Steve wasn't real sure that his time had come. Obviously, he hoped not, but I think Dr. Youngblood, not only from his skill as a surgeon, but also as being able to talk through issues, was a big help for Dr. Youngblood, with Dr. Youngblood. And I think that when I was there at the hospital, Youngblood would come in, and it was just a real great conversation, a man's man. He was exactly the kind of Dr. Conrad that could relate best with the rattlesnake. And I thought that was a great omen that Steve found Dr. Youngblood, because Steve had doctor friends in San Antonio. He lived there, and was enjoying his life there to just some degree. But man, Youngblood he's a salvation. He saved Steve's ass big time and got him some more time before he finally had to say adios.
Let's talk a little bit about the other big top star in the company, The Rock. He had a little bit of controversy in January here with the Opie and Anthony radio show on January 6th. They had a wrestling guest named Sick Boy, who I guess used to do some online musings and postings, but he said something online that got The Rock's attention, or at least The Rock's publicist's attention, and it struck a chord with The Rock. He cuts a promo, storms out of the interview, creates a bit of a controversy. I think the line that upset Rock was something about his heritage and him being half black and half Samoan. Of course, it's some sort of racist comment, and The Rock says that, Opie and Anthony essentially endorsed that type of talk and remark by putting it on the show. Do you remember the big falling out here with Rock and Opie and Anthony?
After I read about it again, I did remember it. So it probably wasn't as big a deal as maybe some would think. It was a big deal for Dwayne, obviously. And he did the right thing as far as having an issue with it, because the quotes that this Sick Boy guy was doing allegedly were kind of kept from Rock. So, Opie and Anthony was a big deal. I mean, that's a good interview. He's selling books. Rock was building his brand, and they had a very popular show for many, many years. So, but a lot of it was just satire and tongue-in-cheek humor. But Rock didn't think it was very funny, nor did anybody else that knew Rock and respected him. So it was, I never heard of him doing anything like that before or since. So I admire his integrity on that, even though it might have cost him some book sales or whatever. Might have made him look bad. He didn't give a damn. He expressed himself. He's still on the show for a good while before he took up powder, and I think that he did the right thing, quite honestly. I mean, of course, I'm biased. I'm going to defend the guy to the end of the earth. But look, you go into a show, you feel like you're trapped, you're bushwhacked a little bit, and it's all about race and talking about your father's heritage and your mother's heritage. And while we're at that, by the way, we certainly want to say our condolences to Rock and his family for the passing of his father not that long ago. And Rocky was 75, Hall of Famer, and really was unless you got in the wrestling business like I did in the 70s, I'm thinking, the 70s was a unique time to be an African American in wrestling. All the bosses were white men. And unfortunately, many of those white men were racist. And Rocky Johnson had to endure whatever, the booking, the pay. He had no leverage. And when you're an independent contractor in the entertainment business and or sports business, whatever, you're at a disadvantage to start with. So I thought that Rocky Johnson did an amazing job of steering the course. And much like I talked about Ernie Ladd here, Ernie Ladd did the same basic thing, except Ernie may have taken it one step farther because Ernie was willing to be a black heel. And in the era where most of the audience was white, and and promoters were a little bit skittish of getting too much heat on a black man because it could cause riots, in their view, it was I don't know. It was just hard to be a wrestler and be black in that era. He withstood all that bullshit and became a major star because the one thing that Rocky Johnson could do that the white promoters loved is sell tickets. So he's going to be missed. I felt bad for Rock and his family, and I know they're enduring. I saw a quote on social media that Rock wrote about his dad. It was very touchy. So our thoughts go out to that. But The Rock was always special, but he had his dad's. The reason I bring his dad up, because not only it's the right thing to do, but Conrad, he knew the fight. He grew up a kid. He grew up a kid with his dad with all these issues, and he heard about him at the supper table. He knew what his dad was going through. So then when somebody throws that shit in his face, he don't just wipe it off and take it. He wipes it off and makes his exit. I'm not going to participate in this horse shit. And he didn't, and I applaud him for it.
Let's talk about somebody else who's going to be making an exit. Ken Shamrock. Meltzer would write, the Shamrock story has gotten really strange. It was reported he had a knee operation, but when Bruce Pritchard called to check on him, he told them that wasn't the case. After that, Shamrock was in Connecticut to meet with Vince and JR on December 30th regarding several issues, and he was walking fine, showing no signs of any surgery. We were also told there was no operation. And then this past week, Barry Bloom, who's Shamrock's agent, was telling WWE officials that Shamrock had just had his knee scoped in the last few days. The gist of the meeting seems to be that Shamrock is expressing an interest in taking time off to fight and perhaps take some opportunities in Japan. WWE is willing to let him leave and do the fights and leave the door open for a return, but not to keep him on salary while he's training. And the meeting ended with the idea that he would be making a decision this week, which last we've heard, it's a decision not yet made. Of course, we know Ken Shamrock's gone not too long after this. What do you remember about the gist of the meeting?
Well, Kenny was not through fighting. When we got Kenny to come in to work for us, we had extremely high hopes for him because he was so much more advanced as a pro wrestler that, we were just not quite aware that his skill set was as refined as it was. Now, did he get better while he was in WWE? Did he acquire more skills? Did he work with better people? Absolutely. And Kenny Shamrock's a very competitive guy. So he didn't want to be the worst match on the card or is okay, or, well, I thought he'd be better. That was not Kenny's mindset. So, but the thing about it was he wasn't through fighting. He didn't have the MMA out of his system yet. And because he had some time on WWE television, which built his profile, built his own personal business and awareness. He was offered some very lucrative money for 2 or 3 MMA fights, and I believe they were in Japan, which also would have probably migrated to the States at some point in time. But it was just not something that we felt like we could bankroll, because he was making big money. I don't mean, probably Ken was making, I'm guessing, somewhere between $250,000 to $400,000 a year. And we just didn't have the funds at that time in Vince's mind to bankroll that while he was away fighting. Because here's what you got. You got him on payroll. You're paying him big money. So what do you do if he gets hurt? Now whose check is he on? And he's still going to get paid from the fight people. But we can't use him now in wrestling because he's hurt. But we're still got the ticket. We still got the tab. It just didn't make all the sense for everybody. It wasn't a win-win. I said many times, if Kenny Shamrock had stayed in WWE when he was just getting rolling, and not had taken those, not left to go back to mixed martial arts, he could have very easily have been at the top of our mountain. I've always believed that Kenny Shamrock had the ability and the mindset and the look and the believability to be a top star, but he didn't get the MMA out of his system. And that was, you can't, Conrad, you can't curtail that. It's in his blood. So, we always let the door open, but for whatever reason, Kenny's kind of entrepreneurial spirit, free spirit as well. It just never did work out that we came back around together, even though we had talks with him ongoing at different times. It just didn't work out. Just the numbers, the timing, and it never seemed like to me, and I may be wrong too. I've been wrong a lot. That until he got the MMA out of his system, he would never be a full-time guy as far as his passion and his dedication was concerned, because he would be serving more than one master. And damn boy, it's hard to serve multiple masters when you're in the WWE. You got one master, one company, and you got to hang with that. And sometimes that's very challenging.
Well, he was probably sleeping easy at night, because a couple of years after this, he's having his probably highest paid fights ever, like UFC 40 with Tito Ortiz. It really is the UFC that first made Dana White's opportunity profitable there with the Fertitta brothers. It was a huge sellout, lots of attention with him and Tito, and they were off to the races after that. That's when sort of the big money started to roll in. So hindsight being what it is, it may not have been a bad decision, but let's keep it moving here. And let's talk about, something you said on Wrestling Observer Live. Meltzer would report that you were looking at putting Amy Dumas, Miss Congeniality, and ECW, and Poppy Chulo together, and they may be introduced in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And allegedly, you also said that Sick Boy in WCW was brought in for an evaluation this coming week, and there were plans to bring him in shortly, but he may do some work, sort of get him ready. And JR also is particularly high on Steve Bradley and Barry Buchanan as far as developmental wrestlers, and he expects D'Lo Brown to sign a new contract, and says that Tazz's debut isn't definite, as they don't yet have a firm grasp on how they want to present his debut. So we know that we're going to see Tazz debut here, but there's lots of other names on here that I don't know when we'll talk about again. Let's start with Barry Buchanan. We know that he's going to come in and have a few different roles within the WWF. He's got a lot of size, a Southern guy. And then for whatever reason, it didn't click. Why do you think that is?
Sometimes guys just don't, no matter how hard they try, no matter how hard everybody in the equation tries, Barry just did not connect with the audience at that point in time. We never brought a better human being, reliable, trustworthy, a great addition to any locker room than Barry Buchanan, Bull Buchanan, wherever you want to, he went through a lot of incarnations. Always willing to try something, So it just, sometimes people just don't click and connect. And maybe that's part of the promotion's fault, by not finding something that was more click worthy, perhaps you might say. But he was a good guy. Steve Bradley was a very solid, fundamentally sound, had some charisma. What a giant of a guy. Barry Buchanan had the size that the WWE always coveted, but just connecting with the audience is what you never know until you get there. But as far as the build up, the locker room, the training, physical conditioning, skill levels. Both those guys, Bradley and Buchanan, had it, and so did D'Lo. D'Lo had a lot of charisma, and D'Lo getting into the Nation of Domination eventually was a pretty good deal for him. He got some notoriety, got some exposure, but D'Lo was kind of underrated in a lot of ways, and so we had good young guys. All those guys I mentioned are athletic. They're all physically tough. They're all reliable. Everything you wanted. But then you get to the final, you get to the last dance of the night, and maybe they just don't have the rhythm to connect to the music that you're hearing. One of those situations. But all those guys are solid human beings, man, and they were exactly what we were looking for at that point in time.
Let's talk about, you're going to bring in Amy, and of course we know she's going to go on to be Lita. Mm-hmm. But originally, when we first see her as a fan, she's paired with Papi Chulo. Of course, we know she's going to go on to be with the Hardy Boyz, and then quite the single star on her own. And she was, often linked with Edge. Really a bona fide Hall of Famer, but we didn't know that when we first see her. What was it about her that stood out in ECW that maybe got you guys' attention?
Her look, her athleticism, hurricanranas, topes, all that fancy name stuff for the Latin or Mexican moves. She was just really athletic and fearless. I thought she had an enormous sex appeal. She wasn't a blonde. She was different. When I first met her, I think she had not had her breast augmentation.
That's right.
Which is totally her call, wasn't ours. And that, of course, added to her look, or it contributed to her look, whether you think it was added or not. But she just had it. She did connect to the audience. For her eyes, her body English, she connected with you if you're sitting in the audience watching her. And that was some part of her magic, I always thought. But basically, that she trained with men. She lived, in a Spartan-esque environment in Mexico to pay her dues, to learn these moves. And that took a lot of courage for a single woman to leave the quote-unquote safety of her own surroundings in the States to go to Mexico City and exist there in a men's world in a strange country, and being a female. Big props to Lita for that. But I always thought she had high hopes. I teased her one time. We were in a meeting, maybe the first meeting. She came to see me in my office, and she was wearing a really cool business suit. It's either lime green or light blue or something. It was light color, solid business suit. I remember that very, very distinctly. And I said, "Oh, by the way, what's that little tattoo you got on your arm?" It wasn't little. And look, you're in a different era there. Now nobody would say nothing about it. I was curious what maybe it meant something. Maybe the artwork or a tattoo had significance and meaning that we could utilize.
Right.
So she jumped up, took her jacket off, and showed me the tattoo. There was nothing salacious or bad or, it certainly was better than Ludwig Borga's SS tattoo on his calf. God. And so she had it, Conrad. You could sometimes you feel that somebody's got it. And look, Papi Chulo had it too, but he wasn't as dedicated, at least in my view, at that point in time, as Amy was. She really wanted to make it. And because everything she'd gone through in Mexico, when I talked with Vince about her, he was impressed with it too. She's not going to quit on us. Bear Bryant said one time, he was a great football coach at Alabama. You might remember him. He said, my practices are hard. My practices are brutal because you're going to quit on my ass. I want you to quit on my ass in practice, not in the game. And she was not going to quit on the environment, the challenges, the uphill grind to get to where she wanted to go. And so she was a big get for us, as it turned out. And she never disappointed me whatsoever at any level. I had a lot of time for Lita.
A lot to unpack on what all you just covered there. You said, she had a breast augmentation, but it was her call. It wasn't something that you guys suggested. Had you, in previous discussions with other talent, suggested that they have an augmentation?
Nope, sure didn't. Didn't step in that territory because you're defenseless. You're defenseless if something goes awry. it's got to be a personal decision made by the talent. If they believe it will enhance their TV persona and their overall look as to what is acceptable by general society, then that's going to be their call. And now, if they need time off to get it done, obviously, if they need money to help them advance some money to get surgery done, I think we've done those things. But that was always based on the talent's decision. And it may some people roll their eyes at this one, but it just wasn't my place to tell you to get a boo job, and then something go wrong, and you did it because you felt like you were compelled to because your boss said to, and now you get issues. The WWE's got a problem, so that's kind of where we were with that. We just never did that to any. And I'm sure there's going to be somebody who says, "Well, I knew if I didn't do it." Yeah, okay.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say is, do you think some female talent would say this was our sort of equivalent of when guys would say, well, no, they didn't tell me I had to take steroids, but I knew if I didn't, then I wouldn't be on TV. And it becomes this artificial psychoanalysis, and you get in your head and you wind up doing it. The other thing I wanted to ask about, cause I don't think we ever talked about this. You said Ludwig Borga had an SS tattoo on his calf. How did you guys find out about that? And what was the plan of action?
Well, I think somebody saw him in the shower. I didn't have guys do, body cavity searches or nothing, man. Nobody dropped their drawers in my office.
Sure.
I ain't Harvey Weinstein here.
Right.
We found out about it. And of course the deal was, I even think, if I'm not mistaken, he was wearing boots that that were low cut, and he had a very diminutive SS tattoo. It wasn't huge. It wasn't, overbearingly large, but it was there. And so I think the discussion should have been, we can't use you. Because if we do, we're basically condoning the Holocaust. So I looked at it. And I didn't think that was anything we wanted to be compared to. So he got better, he got different boots and covered it up. So I don't think there might have been once, maybe a handful of times before he got new boots that was even seen there. But it was very uncomfortable, and he was uncomfortable, and he was untalented, but he had $1 million look, and then he looked like a Ferrari, Conrad, with a 4-cylinder motor.
Right.
He just didn't have the aptitude, but boy, he had the great look, the intensity, the strength, all that stuff. But sometimes guys think that's all they need, and they don't need to work any harder to get better at their skill set. But the SS tattoo was very uncomfortable. And when he left, I don't even remember what the circumstances were, to be honest with you. Nobody shed any tears. And it's sad. He died much too young, and he never got away from controversy in the dark cloud for whatever it was, several things I'm hearing. So that was a little uncomfortable situation there.
Let's keep it moving. Let's talk about somebody who's coming in. Tazz, as we know, is going to be coming in, but there's rumor and innuendo that Kevin Nash is unhappy and he may be getting cut loose from WCW. Meltzer would say the WWF hierarchy had a meeting regarding making an offer to Nash if he were to cut loose from WCW. The mood was very strong not to bring him in, and that he's doing the company far more benefit as a cancer in the other locker room. So I'm curious, JR, first of all, there's a lot going on in WCW. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but the idea that Nash might be available and you guys don't want him, that sort of jumps off the page.
Not everybody didn't want him. And I'll be fully transparent here. Kevin Nash has been a friend of mine since I met him, at the Cheetah when he was a bouncer. Gentleman's Club in Atlanta. So I've known Kevin for long before he got in the wrestling business. I think Jerry Briscoe may have introduced him to me, but playing back, a guy that's a good looking guy that's got a athletic body that's 7 feet tall. You can't just not look.
Yeah.
If you believe that he had the look, the appearance of a star, and he had the desire to leave the bar business, the gentleman's club business, and get into wrestling. So, we had always had an interest in Kevin in that regard, but some people just, Kevin's a very, very intelligent guy. And sometimes in certain circles, when you're the guy you're talking to or he's smarter than you, it makes some people uncomfortable. And so if you're in a creative vein, in the creative world, and you fit something to a talent, thinking that because they're naive, they're insecure, they don't want to say no because they might get in trouble, it might make them look bad, perception. And Kevin was the kind of guy that would speak up. Oh, if we did that, it's going to do this, and why don't we could do this and get the same deal done, whatever. He had ideas, and some people were intimidated by that. So there were some on the creative side that had bad experiences with Kevin in the past, apparently. I had no issues with it. Here's the deal. Bottom line, at the end of the day, if Vince wants him there, guess what? JR's going to hire him. I ain't going to ask nobody. I ain't going to poll the creative guys. Hey, what are you, pimply faced little jerk-offs, going to think about me bringing Kevin Nash in? Oh, by the way, it doesn't matter what you think because Vince has already already wants me to sign him. But Kevin was a keeper. He helped us a lot, in my opinion. He's a Hall of Fame guy, but he was outspoken. He still is outspoken. He's a great follow on Twitter, by the way, because he has a lot of multiple interests. So the people just were intimidated by his intellect, I think, in a lot of ways. And then it all his intellect became his attitude. And that's what the difference is. So you're challenged by a guy's intellect. You can say, well, he's got a bad attitude. Oh, why? It's because he's smarter than you? And that basically was it. So Kevin was a controversial figure at that time. And a lot of people had bad memories. But, anytime you get a guy with name identity, box office, 7 feet, athletic, you don't just turn your backside. We don't want to do that. He might be a little higher maintenance than we're used to working with.
Let me put you up on some game, as JR would say. Home Chef provides fresh ingredients and chef design recipes conveniently delivered to your doorstep to simplify your cooking experience. Whether you prefer their classic meal kits with pre-portioned ingredients and easy instructions, speedy recipes ready in less than 30 minutes, oven-ready kits with pre-chopped ingredients, or quick microwave meals that assemble in minutes, Home Chef has you and the entire family covered for delicious meals without the hassle. Home Chef has over 30 options a week and serves a variety of dietary needs, so you don't have to worry about what to make ahead of time. And not only is it convenient, but it's economical too. Home Chef customers save an average of $86 per month on their groceries. Hey, I just want to mention too that Home Chef even has a delicious kid-friendly family menu. They've got 18 new options each week, and that'll satisfy even the pickiest of eaters. Hey, let me just give you a little pro tip. You want to make your wife happy? Order some Home Chef. Y'all start cooking together and you picked out something that even the kids would eat. Buddy, I don't know what you're eating for dinner, but I know what you're going to enjoy for dessert. Roll Tide. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering my listeners 18 free meals plus free dessert for life. Yeah, free dessert for life. And of course, we're going to get you free shipping on your first box. Go right now to homechef.com/JR. That's homechef.com/JR for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. Homechef.com/JR. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. Homechef.com/JR. Let's talk about the other thing that's happening in WCW. It is a mass exodus. Meltzer would report WCW sent unconditional release letters to Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, Conan, Shane Douglas, Eddie Guerrero, and Perry Saturn on January 19th. And I guess here, technically, the release would allow them to start with Titan on February 1st, provided they agree to not say anything publicly disparaging about WCW and agree not to sue WCW. And after both sides sign the releases and they're executed on the 25th, it's believed that Benoit and Malenko and Guerrero and Saturn are all free to start with Titan as soon as this coming week. Allegedly, Conan and Shane Douglas maybe had a change of heart, didn't sign the release, et cetera, et cetera. I think Shane called Steve Austin to get word to Vince McMahon if he was interested. And, we know that didn't actually happen. Talk to me a little bit about when you hear there's a mass exodus and how all that comes together for these guys to show up on WWF TV.
Well, the word gets out because, you know, the old expression, telephone, telegraph, tell a wrestler. So nothing that went on down there, and I'm sure the same thing with our place, reciprocally, was a secret. And those guys were tired of being looked upon as, none of you guys are 6 feet tall, you're undersized, and guys your height, your size will not draw money, because nobody will believe that you're really good or you're really tough or whatever. So, man, when I heard those 4 guys could be available, I got very interested in that situation, and so therefore we brought them to Vince's house. You know, we brought them to Greenwich. We brought them they stayed in Stanford. But look, I was a major fan of all those guys for different reasons. Saturn was the irreverent one, and the most, you know, unique cat probably of the group. Dean Malenko could wrestle and have a great match with anybody alive. He's a great coach now for AEW, and he had just all that was just the knowledge, the whole thing. And, you know, he's 5'8" or 5'9", whatever the hell he is. And then you had Eddie and Chris, and that's where the rubber met the road, because in those 2 guys, in my opinion, as a EVP of Talent Relations, those were 2 men that were as good as any 2 in-ring performers in the world. That covers a lot of territory. That's a big territory.
Yeah.
And they both were different, but they both were extraordinary in-ring performers. And again, no matter if you had a young roster or veterans, the match with Benoit and or Jericho, speaking of those 2 specifically, were going to be great. And I couldn't believe, I really couldn't believe that WCW is allowing that to happen without any compensation, without, you know, we didn't trade anybody, we didn't give them any money, we didn't do anything. We sat back and all the papers were signed, they got released, and hell, we were ready. I'd have signed them in 2 minutes later if, you know, if you could have physically done it. But man, it was a big gift for us. The Radicalz sitting at ringside, I still remember that, sitting at ringside, and there they are, and man, and look at how great Eddie became, and Chris. Unfortunately, Chris's legacy, as I mentioned, is going to be always be tainted because of the last 48 hours or so of his life and the murder, suicide, and all the sad, horrific things. But if you have the ability just to table that for a second, just for a second, and go back and look at his in-ring work, how great was Chris Benoit? Pretty damned amazing. And then there was Eddie Guerrero, who, you know, I compare Sammy Guevara to young Eddie Guerrero all the time on TV on Wednesday nights, because he has the same cocky, confident attitude, and also Latino, that Eddie had. So I just thought the world of all those guys, Conrad, and they were big gifts for us. They really truly were. They were not hard to negotiate with. They were given fair prices or fair deals. We signed them within a week. They're all signed, I believe. So and the same old bullshit. You get some guys in the front office. Man, they're all small. How they're going to draw any money? They're all small. So I tell them, I said, you guys are so experienced. How long have you been in the wrestling business? 2 years. I've been around 3 years. Oh, good for you. So you're saying that because you've heard Vince say it, right?
Right.
Do you have any idea why he said it? Or you take it at face value because that goes for everybody? It doesn't go for everybody, fellas. Every now and then I said, why don't you guys go do some research? Tell me how tall Dick the Bruiser was. Tell me how tall Vern Gagne was. Tell me how tall Buddy Rogers was. Jim Melendez. You know, the Briscoes, 6 feet, 6'1", maybe. So it's bullshit. So nonetheless, that was a monumental day for me in my career to get those 4 guys' name on paper for us.
Let's talk about the 2 guys who aren't signed. Conan, Shane Douglas. Shane in particular has some real hurt feelings. He supposedly, you know, he's with all these guys on the WCW faction, the Revolution, and they had all sort of made this pact that we're all going to go together. The rumor and innuendo was some of these guys who hadn't been to the company felt like maybe Shane had a little bit of stink on him, and he may actually hurt their leverage and ability to get a deal if they really do try to stick together, to the point that they all make plans to go to Connecticut and don't tell Shane. And when Shane hears about it, he calls Malenko's cell phone. Malenko denies it and says, no, I'm at my brother's in Florida. But then he knows what hotel that the company would put talent up. So he calls the hotel, and sure enough, all four have reservations there. Even when he tries to press Malenko on it, Malenko still kayfabes him because Vince and JR allegedly had told him to keep it quiet. So ultimately Shane doesn't wind up coming in ever again for the company. And a lot of people want to know, hey, what's up with that? Everybody made some sort of comeback, whether it was the Ultimate Warrior or it was, Bret Hart. Anybody who left on bad terms still found a way to sort of mend those fences and get back. Shane Douglas feels like the exception to that. Why would that be?
Well, I think he got bad advice of his lawyer. First of all, he didn't sign his release. And if he's still under contract, Conrad, I can't go talk to him officially about a deal. If you're unencumbered, as the other guys were, because their lawyer didn't give them that advice, so they became free agents, immediate free agents, and we grabbed them up. I believe, and at least this is what I would have done. I would have signed Shane Douglas in a heartbeat, but I can't do a damn thing until he's released, until he's free and clear to go. But I think he got some bad advice. And the thing about Shane, and I'm sure he still gets his feathers ruffled with this whole endeavor. I'd like to say, hey, look, I've been pissed off at different things in my career as well. And some were rightfully so deals, and some were not. Some were my ego deals. But I like Shane's game. He's talented, but I think his biggest enemy was him sometimes. He's a very intelligent guy. And sometimes those intelligent guys go down a road that they don't need to be traveling, and they get too far down the road and they can't turn around. I think that's kind of what the situation here was. He was very outspoken about his negativity for WWE at various times. He didn't do himself any favors, but when the time to strike was when the other guys were getting their releases and coming in, and I fully believe that between their endorsement and mine, that Vince would wanted me to hire him. It just didn't work out. And it's unfortunate. He had a very lousy experience the first time as Dean Douglas, and that was bullshit. That was not his fault, but it was, he was not, he wasn't popular with the other kids, so to speak. But I feel badly about that situation, but time goes on and you got to move on, and hopefully he's moved on with this situation. I've seen him a few places since then, obviously. Well, always cordial. He's a nice guy. He's from Jan's hometown of Pittsburgh. He's got that Pittsburgh wrestling background, the great Bruno Sammartino established all those dudes, Dominic DiNucci and all those cats. So he's just, I don't know, man. It was a bad timing, and he got on the wrong side of the wrong people. Those people were not me. I can promise you that.
What about Conan? Conan's a guy who these days, it feels like he has 42 jobs. He works with every pro wrestling promotion under the sun, except WWE. He had a brief little run there a long time prior to this, but never pops up again. Why do you think that is?
I think his first run was considered less than successful. And sometimes when creative makes a miscue, they blame it on the talent. And I think Carlos, great friend of mine, was kind of subjected to that. Carlos has got a great mind. He's very, very intelligent. His father's a lawyer, and he's a great liaison. If you want to be diversified and you're going to increase your Latino populace in your company, it's hard to beat him as your guy to talk to talent and work out finishes and things of that nature. But that's a story there. I just think that his first deal, was the mass deal he had, I don't know, it didn't work. And so instead of just saying, well, it was an ill-fated idea, the talent did his job, we just didn't do ours. I never heard that discussion made in that regard. So, and WWE missed a good guy there. They missed a guy that could have been a real contributor.
It feels weird that he's never even been back to work behind the scenes. I mean, you guys gave shit gimmicks to guys like Glenn Jacobs that, didn't get over, but he still had an opportunity to come back and try something different. And eventually it hit. And clearly that happened for Conan, you know, in WCW, where he had a much different presentation than Max Moon or whatever silliness was tried with Titan. But behind the scenes, to your point, you know, if he is this well-respected, great mind for the biz, it feels like, man, there would have been a spot for him somewhere. Do you think he just wasn't a WWE type guy? It just wasn't.
Maybe polished, but that's the thing about it. Until you get to know the guy, you don't realize just how intelligent that he is. And I don't think anybody took the time to get to know Charles. I'd give him about 3 names here. His real name's Charles.
Sure.
I call him Carlos. He told me on the cruise last year, my friends call me Carlos, JR. I said, okay, Carlos. We bonded right there. I'm his friend now. He's my friend. And I am very proud of that friendship. But he has a lot to offer any company, because not so much in the ring anymore.
Sure.
But his mind. He's a play caller. And he can help call good plays and help make stars better, all stars. But certainly he can communicate best with many of the young Latino stars, because many of them grew up idolizing him. That's like these kids at Adam Cole's guys at NXT. Those guys talk about how great it is to have Shawn Michaels around. Guess why? He's a great teacher, and they grew up idolizing him.
Right.
So he doesn't have to convince them that what he's telling them is the right thing to do. They know it's the right thing to do because they've seen him do it and execute it and be successful. So the same thing holds true for Conan and his luchador friends. So yeah, good guy, man. And like you said a while ago, he does seem like he's got about 100 jobs. He doesn't lack for work.
No, I mean, that's the thing. He's working with literally every promotion but WWE in some capacity. Let's talk about Sable. Wade Keller would report that Playboy has settled its lawsuit brought by the WWF over the use of the name Sable in promoting Rena Miro's second photo spread. Playboy was said to have made an undisclosed cash payment to the WWF and will provide some free advertising and royalties from future sales of the issue. And in September, a federal judge ruled that the magazine was wrong to use the WWF trademark moniker Sable in promoting the issue after Miro was no longer associated with the WWF. What do you remember about this? This is another weird deal where, you know, Sable's out of here, but we're still dealing with it.
Oh, big old pissing contest. Probably was a lack of communication. Could have probably solved all those issues without having to have a lawsuit and have legal fees and bad publicity, if you want to perceive it to be that way. At WWE, we were right all along in that deal. There was I think Playboy just thought that they didn't do their due diligence. They thought that because one of their former stars is on the cover of Playboy, that was going to be good for our business. And that may have been right on that deal. It's just the fact that simply legally, they didn't have the right to utilize the trademark owned by WWE. Arena did not own Sable. WWE owned Sable. So if you're going to use our character name, you need to pay us something. And so they worked it out. And I think that settlement was done pretty damn quick. I don't think they realized the error of their ways. But here's the other thing about that. She sold, it's like that lady in that commercial. My she shed burnt down, Sheila. I think that,
Records. She set records.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you guys' association with Playboy would continue for years and years. I mean, I think you had folks appearing in it as late as like 2008. So, the partnership would continue. Something that didn't continue though, is the WWF nightclub. We should mention that it opened around this same time, and Wade would report that, the festivity started at 6:30 on a Wednesday. And the entrance to the party was by invitation only, but it included all of the company employees and their families and sponsors and their families. And of course, the local media and celebrities. And there's lots of, traffic siphoned off, where people can sort of gather around the area where they're not invited. They just want to sort of be around. There's an open bar and catered food, and it's a who's who. Of course, the McMahon family's there, and you're there, and Jericho's there, and Angle's there. What do you remember about this, this big idea that ultimately we know wound up not being a successful one?
The sad part about the idea was that it should have made money. I think it did make money for a little while. The general manager of the club, was caught embezzling a lot of money. went to Rikers Island, had an extended stay there. So there were issues in management, which failed the situation. Great location. Hey, the location is still hanging and banging. It's just under another name. Here you are downtown New York City or Times Square. It just had bad management. But I think the concept, the idea, unless the rent and everything was so prohibitive that it was never going to be successful, I don't know that. But I think the management of it and then losing all that capital, that cash, hundreds of thousands of dollars before they realized it. But I remember it being a real fun party atmosphere. People put on their little party clothes and are having fun. And it was a night off, and being in New York, hot and cold running limos, and like you said, the media was there. There were stars there. I remember Joan London was there from Good Morning America. She's a big fan, still is. And the late Luther Vandross was there, and Luther loved the guys, and he loved wrestling. The women loved Luther because I remember Luther talking to my wife Jan about fashion and the fact that they're both passed now, as we know. But Jan was a big, Louis Vuitton was one of her big brands. And Luke, they called him, had knowledge of all that stuff as much as any woman. And so he became one of the favorites of the divas and of some of the wives, including mine at that time. But it was a fun time, Conrad. Festive, fun, amazing food. The open bar never hurts anything.
Oh.
3 or 4 drinks, 3 or 4 trips to the open bar makes all food taste better. So, but it was fun. It was a fun, festive party night, kind of simple, little exposure for the guys. But I think everybody had a good time. I had a great time that night because I knew that my talents were enjoying themselves. It looked like another nice investment for the company. And I had a 30-minute car ride home. So it was pretty cool. And by the way, the next morning, I was in my office at 9 a.m.
Let's get to the show, man. Royal Rumble 2000. Man, I love the open to this show. I love the way MSG looks. I like the set that they do here. And we have got Kurt Angle coming out to, a welcome that only New York City could give him. He's on an undefeated streak. He's out here preaching positivity, and he's got his 3 eyes, and man, that white meat baby face stuff, New York wants nothing to do with it. And then we get to learn who the mystery opponent is. And when that music hits and the audience realizes that this is their hometown guy, Tazz, the crowd goes nuts.
Yeah. Tazz earned one of the biggest ovations that I'd ever heard in the Garden from anybody in WWE in my career there. There are times I remember when Austin came back. I remember when Triple H came back. A lot of guys returning that we can go back on and say, well, that was a big pop. They all were. You're right. But nothing I ever heard from a brand new guy that had never worked in WWE before overshadows what Tazz did. I know for him personally, and congratulations on Tazz, he signed a long-term contract to broadcast on AEW. And of course, we got renewed by TNT through 2023, which is great for me because I was always wondering what I was going to do when I got past 70. I want to work. So hopefully I'll get that opportunity. That's good for the company. And Tazz is there now. So it's good for us to have a quality guy on our team. But man, he got the audience went nuts. They went nuts. And the beauty of this match, here's the irony of this thing. We ain't got Austin there. We got a match that went 3 minutes and 16 seconds between Tazz and Kurt.
By the way, the crowd goes bananas and they're chanting while Kurt's trying to do the promo and really piss off all the fans. There's already a "We Want Tazz" chant, even though you guys had been denying online on the website, that it was not Tazz and he would not be the mystery opponent. They're ready for it. And when he comes out, huge ovation, big ECW chant. Meltzer would say Angle looked like a total superstar coming out. Everything they did was really good, but a lot of good suplexes thrown in, but they were so rushed. They were doing near falls before anyone even cared about the match. Mm-hmm. Angle took a great backdrop over the top rope and one time landed almost on his head from a suplex. And after the suplex on his head, Tazz delivered a head and arm suplex and a T-bone suplex before putting on the choke, and the ref stopped the match. And they were doing the gimmick, whether or not it's a choke or a sleeper.
Right.
Angle in his post-match interview didn't know what happened, still thought he was undefeated. This has been talked about a lot. By the way, Meltzer gave the match 2 stars, but Tazz does not look back at this moment very fondly. He said that he felt like, you know, when he hears the pop from the crowd, he thought, oh no, I'm screwed. And this is wrestlers getting in their own head, because he thought this wasn't their creation. I'm over before they want me to be over.
Oh God,
this is not ideal. And that's,
he might overthought that a little bit, Conrad, to be honest with you.
Well, here's the other thing. You guys on commentary are debating as to whether or not his finisher is even legal.
Right.
Is it a sleeper? Is it a choke? I mean,
right.
I understand if I'm a wrestler and I'm a new guy and everybody's sort of looking over their shoulder anyway, paranoia is real in wrestling. But if you were him, you've got to be thinking when you see and hear that, hey, are they really trying to help me? And then the next day, he gets a phone call, and I think when he shows up to the building, immediately Vince and Paul and not Paul, but Vince and Bruce want to meet with him and tell him that he's dangerous and that he's not going to be dropping guys on their head here. And that's not what they do. And I think Tazz would say this was really just a miscommunication in the match where, you know, Kurt was trying to help him out on the suplex and he jumped a little bit, and Tazz didn't want guys to do that. He wanted to just muscle him up himself, and he could do it, and felt like he had better control when he was in total control. So he sits him down and starts to move over again. Even though the reaction from the fans are there, Tazz looks back at this and thinks, man, I was fucked from day one. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think he had a little overreaction there when he heard the crowd pop. There's no way, as a talent or someone that's involved in talent management, that I'm going to look at a great pop like that as a negative. I think he overreacted there, in my opinion. I do remember there were moments in the match, and look, Tazz didn't do those moves, the suplexes, a cappella. Kurt was taking them. Kurt was a little bit daredevilish. It takes 2 to tango in these scenarios, but there's no doubt that there was some release type suplexes, some things going on that we had not had a lot of in WWE. And the reason for that was because they're not totally safe. And you got to have a guy that knows how to take the bumps, that, you know, is prepared for it. There were moments in that 3-minute and 16-second match that, you know, somebody could foresee that Kurt was just going along to try to help Tazz, but he was acquiescing to unsafe moves. And you can't throw guys on their head. You can't. And so I don't know if that's anybody's fault. It could be nerves. It could be not as bad as people thought. But look, Tazz was a difference maker. I remember, I can see in my mind as we speak right this very minute that my secretary handed me a note from a phone message from Peter Cernicchia. So the first thing I say, who the fuck is Peter Cernicchia? Well, he said you'd know who he was. He's one of the boys. So hell, I didn't have any idea who Peter Cernicchia was. I know his real name. I certainly knew who Tazz was, but I didn't know what Tazz's real name. So I did some investigative work, and that's Tazz. And Tazz is very leery. Tazz is still, you know, he gets unsettled too damn easy. I kid him about it. So that was the deal. I think he was a little bit paranoid. He still is paranoid in a lot of ways. He shouldn't be. He should be sure of himself. He's got great ability, but I think that whole thing was kind of blown out of proportion. And I don't know how comfortable he was once he got with us. And then I can tell you that not too long after that, he tore his pec. I think, or tricep. He tore something, and he was concerned. I remember Bruce and I talking to him. I said, "Look, we're not going to turn you loose. We're going to pay for your surgery. We're going to pay your weekly until while you're healing, and then we'll hope we get you back to work." And that was the bottom line of that deal. We weren't going to screw you around. We're not going to screw you around, and we didn't. But he had never been in an environment like that. He felt totally that he was going to be protected and taken care of. But a lot of guys didn't like Tazz because he got over at 5'8". And again, it's that same old deal of size matters. And if you're 6'3" or 4, you're going to endorse that all you can because you want Vince to not change his philosophy. But he goddamn sure changed his philosophy during this whole period of time because we got Tazz in there, we got Benoit, we got Malenko, Saturn, and lovable, God bless him, Eddie. And none of them were 6 feet tall. So a lot of things happened that was going against the grain of some of the power brokers behind the scenes, and certainly some of the creative guys that heard Vince say over and over, he's too short, and you got to be bigger. We got to be bigger. You got to be able to project. And so they bought it. And so a lot of those guys were always on the other side of the short guys I was recruiting.
We should mention this is a pretty important moment in Tazz's wrestling career. It's on a WWE DVD somewhere where he says something like when he broke into wrestling, he had 3 goals, 1 to make a living in wrestling, 2 to hold any championship belt, and 3 to wrestle in the Garden. And this sort of, finish his last goal. And he sort of overcome with that on his ride to the building. And he talked about that on, I think it was the Rise and Fall of ECW, where he talks about calling Paul Heyman, where things didn't exactly go as planned. He hadn't been on the best terms with Paul on the exit, but he handled his business, and now he's overcome with emotion and wants to call and talk to him on the way in. And he's about to wrestle an Olympic gold medalist and hand that gold medalist his first defeat in the Garden. And you're debuting at the first $1 million gate in the history of WWE in Madison Square Garden. Big moment. So go back and watch this. This is a really special moment in wrestling history. But the next match, man, it's another barn burner. And this is worth the price of admission here. It's the Hardy Boyz and the Dudleys. They're doing a double tables match. The rule here is you've got to put both members through a table. And again, we're not getting a lot of time, but we're making the most of our time. 10 minutes, 18 seconds. Meltzer gives it 3.25 stars. I absolutely love it. The big spot here, of course, is, we've got Bubba taking the Nestea plunge backwards off the balcony through a bunch of tables. We've also seen, Jeff Hardy do the big dive off the top. Just really a remarkable match. And this crowd is ready for it. They're hot, and the crowd really adds a lot to this match. I loved it. Watching it back was a real treat.
All 4 of those guys have the ability, and still do in a large sense, in my view, to connect with the audience. They know their role. They knew what their position on the team they were playing. They got it. And, I hope Jeff gets back on track, but getting back in the wrestling business full time is not good for his health. He should pass. That's just a good old JR's advice. It ain't your obligation to get back on the front line if it's not doing yourself any favors. Matt Hardy's one of the great minds in wrestling, in my view. I think Matt Hardy could help a lot of people, and he should be able to help a lot of people. These 2 kids, I signed them, the Hardy Boyz, and one of the neat stories they told me that they were raised by a single father who was a rural mail carrier, and that they made their own wrestling gear off an old sewing machine that I guess their mom might have had at one time. They made their own gear, teenagers, and they weren't big muscle guys, which we all remember, but god dang, they had great passion and they had amazing courage, so they were special. And Matt's really special now, and I'd love to work with Matt again someday, and hopefully I will. But Bubba, you hear Bubba's great work on Busted Open with Dave LaGreca and all those cats. Bubba's got a great mind. And between Bubba and Matt, not discounting the other 2 guys, but between Bubba and Matt, you had 2, what I believe could be great bookers, calling the shots of their match. And they made those matches extraordinary. So you're right, Conrad. Meltzer gives it a 3.25 stars. I might venture to say he might have been a little low on that.
Yep, I would agree. Really a special match. Go out of your way to see this one. It's just fantastic. And these guys, are hitting on all cylinders here. Next up is something interesting that we could probably not ever see again. It's a Miss Royal Rumble Bikini Contest. And it was pretty strongly promoted leading into this that there were going to be judges, including Edge and Freddie Blassie. It turns out that there's no Edge, no mention of him whatsoever. Instead, the judges wind up being Freddie Blassie, Sergeant Slaughter, Tony Gurria, Fabulous Moolah, Johnny V, and Andy Richter from the Conan O'Brien show. Ivory comes out. Terry's here. Jacqueline is doing her thing. BB, who a lot of people may have forgotten, you'll be reminded when you see her.
She's great.
Luna's here. Kat's here. And Meltzer's pretty critical. He says Ivory came out looking like a mid-30s woman bodybuilder with implants, which is basically what she is. Terry came out.
And is that so bad?
No.
Is that bad?
No.
Did they mean that to be a knock or just an overall observation? Because Ivory fulfilled, she did so much good stuff for us. It's amazing. She took, she was an experienced, skilled worker, just like Jackie Moore. And they took their time and their patience to make a lot of these young divas passable in the ring. So Ivory was what a MVP she was, as was Jackie. But when I read that, about that deal and how he described that, I said, well, is that wrong? Come on.
He would also write, Terry came out in a very skimpy one piece. Jacqueline did a total stripper routine. BB didn't get the pop you'd think. Luna refused to disrobe and appeared to be very unhappy about even being a part of this, which I'm presuming is probably more storyline than anything. Kat, who was the only one in the group who had a body that didn't look like it was created by science, came out wearing a bikini made out of air bubbles that you would mail things in.
That was Lawler's idea, by the way.
Mae Young came out, removed her top, and was declared the unanimous winner. This is, my goodness, what a segment, what an era. What do you remember about this? And
strictly comedy. It's a let me up match, as Vince used to say, because we're getting ready to get some more heavy duty wrestling, and he didn't want all wrestling on a wrestling show. He really worked hard to make sure that we had entertainment content within. And when you have your primary demographic are males 18 to 49 and 18 to 34, then the bikini contest seemed to be catering to them as it should. So it just let me up, a comedy, just see what everybody's wearing, and was kind of cool. And of course the star of the show was Mae Young, and why not?
I do not hate this next match though, because it's just weird. It's Chris Jericho in a 3-way with Chyna and Bob Holly. This is a wrestling match, not a porn. Meltzer would say, can you imagine what kind of a physique Holly would have if he actually took steroids? Chyna ruined the match. There were only a few points where the fans booed her weak offense, but clearly they weren't happy with the prospect of her as champ. The gimmick of her in the ring as a title contender has now run its course. The finish made me think they realized it, but after the Rumble, you can see Jericho still going to be married to her. With the way they're booking, married might actually be the apropos word. Jericho had the walls on Holly, and Chyna made the save with a weak clothesline, and the crowd booed heavily. Chyna then used a pedigree on Holly, but he kicked out. Jericho does a crossbody off the top while Chyna was on Holly's shoulders, but she kicks out, and then Chyna superplexed Holly off the top, and after a few near falls, Chyna gets the Boston Crab on Holly, and the crowd is booing heavily. Jericho does the run in, breaks it up, and gives a face buster and Cubrata for the pin. Even though Jericho did the coolest moves in the ring, Holly is actually the best worker of this trio. Star and a quarter. Leading into this, Chyna and Jericho had been together for months. Back at even Survivor Series, when Chyna was the Intercontinental Champ, she beats Jericho. She loses the title to him the following month at Armageddon. They're facing off on the last SmackDown of the year, where they're both pinning each other. And as a result, they become co-champions. They briefly team up for a little bit. And I don't know, Meltzer didn't love it. And certainly the fans in the crowd didn't love it that night. Do you think this was just a failed experiment? Chyna in here with the men?
Experiment. I don't know. I didn't love it either. I thought it was, I don't like, this is going to piss some people off, and so you can be pissed off, you choose. I'm at JRSBBQ. So tweet away. And I don't have a problem with it, because your opinion is just as viable as mine. My opinion is I'm not a fan of intergender wrestling. Well, he didn't like Tessa Blanchard. No, I love Tessa Blanchard. I'd known Tessa Blanchard since she was a little girl. I'm great friends with her father. I was great friends with her grandfather, Joe Blanchard. So I got a lot of respect for the Blanchard family. This has nothing to do with Tessa per se. It has to do with the booking of intergender matches. And you can bet with the success that she has earned in Impact Wrestling, there'll be other promotions and indies that will try to replicate that while strike while the iron's hot, so to speak. I'm just not. I think it's unrealistic. I've had these talks. I had long talks, and some were very stern with Joni, who always took this shit personally. Well, you just don't want the women to get over it. No, that's stupid, Joni. Joni, that makes no sense. Why would I even want that? Look at it. What do I do for a living here? To get stars over. That's what we work on. I think it's a short-term deal. It's a hot shot booking, and it's a eye roller because it's really not that realistic. And boy, I remember when we talked to her about wrestling, being the women's champion. She could be our Hogan in that division. Oh, she didn't want to do that because she didn't want to wrestle the other women. And you know why that was true? Because a lot of the other women, like Jackie Moore and like Ivory, were better workers than Chyna. Chyna had the look, the feel, the appeal, the charisma that the others didn't quite have because of her size. But the intergender thing was a pain in the ass. It was just, even the boys said, God, how long are we going to do this? The guy said, I'm not going to sell for her. I'm not going to do this. Well, of course you're getting paid. You'll do what the hell you need to do to earn your money. But it wasn't a good thing. The booking wasn't good. And that's got nothing to do with Chris Jericho. I love Chris Jericho. He's the AEW champion. He's the reverend of reinvention. But it just was a loser from the start, the get-go, but he had to endure it, and he went through it. Hey, Chris Jericho almost had to reinvent himself again then to pull this stuff off because it just was illogical and didn't make a lot of sense to me. So if I haven't pissed all of you off that love the intergender stuff, you should love it. If that's what you like, then like it. I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm just telling you my opinion. I don't think it's realistic. And there's, never a bloody nose. It was like powder puff stuff. I didn't like it. And I don't think it, and of course you heard the crowd in the garden, as you said, Conrad, they didn't like it. They shit on it. And you got Hall of Fame talent in the ring, they got doo-dooed on. And because the fans didn't like the concept.
What do you think of, putting Bob Holly in the mix? I mean, so far it's really been the Jericho Chyna show, and
somebody had to lose.
Okay.
He was a designated, fall dropper in that one. And, it is also, there were a lot of guys in the success of WWE, during the Attitude Era and around that time that were unsung heroes. Bob Holly was one of those unsung heroes. He always showed up for work, ready to work his ass off, and to be the toughest guy on the card. And I love that attitude. But there are a lot of other dudes that were on that roster as well that were kind of unsung. They filled in gaps. They filled in voids. And on this night, the WWE needed someone to drop the fall in that match, and they didn't want to beat Jericho or Chyna. So Bobby Holly was the designatee, and he did a great job doing it.
Hey, does Blue Chew work? If you're asking that question, we want you to know that Blue Chew is putting their money where their mouth is by giving you a month free. Blue Chew is an online service that delivers you the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in chewable form. The process is super simple too. You just sign up at bluechew.com. You consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door. And the best part? Well, it's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. Blue Chew wants men rock hard. That's what they told me. That's the mission. They will not stop until every man is bricked up like a brick house, until every tent is pitched, until every rod is raised. Discover your options at bluechew.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code JR at checkout. Just pay the $5 shipping. That's bluechew.com. The promo code is JR to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast. Let's talk about this match again, though, because Jericho, as we get back to this three-way IC match, has talked about being in a spot where he's supposed to give Chyna a bulldog, and somehow he forgets where he's at, and he just draws a complete blank. And so he's just sort of standing there in the ring trying to remember what exactly they had planned ahead of time. Now, I want to be clear, that's not typical for what Jericho does, but these matches with Chyna, they had to lay out, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so it just wasn't registering, and improv is out of the question. So finally, Bob Holly yells, "Bulldogger, dumbass," in Jericho's direction. And he wrote, "If Holly hadn't said anything, I'd still be standing there trying to figure out what the hell to do." So a fun moment in the match when you know that story and you go back and watch it, because you see it and it's hysterical. And it's also pretty funny when we see The Rock do an interview and he's doing something about a glass of shut up juice here. The Rock can do no wrong. He is by far the brightest star in wrestling here in January of 2000. And in a weird way, the timing couldn't be any better, because without Austin around, it allows Rock to shine even a little brighter.
It's all about depth, baby. And Rock and Austin, the most amazing 1-2 punch that I would suggest ever in the history of the business. God dang, I go through my photos sometimes. There's a picture at a WrestleMania. I can't remember when it was. It was, last 5-6 years, I believe, with me standing between Rock and Austin. It's probably my most cherished picture, because it showed me with my two of my star signees. And I'm not knocking all the other guys I signed. They're Hall of Fame guys, the Cena's, Lesnar's, all these dudes. Not at all. But you got to admit, Conrad, I think you probably would agree with this. Rock and Austin were a different level.
Oh, yeah.
And that has been a blessing. It was a blessing. And it seems to be a curse right now, because WWE can't find or get another talent over
to that
like
level.
Austin and Rock were.
Yeah.
And until that happens and talents break through and create their own way and reestablish their own TV persona, et cetera, they're going to be where they are in that regard, which is not bad. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the automatic sellouts. We go back to this Garden show. This Garden show had 19,000 and change in the building, sold out. Our friend Raphael Morphy was a promoter of that event. It was a boom. It sold out. Big money, as we know, 1.1 million. And now that's not the case. It's not an automatic sellout in the Garden. And the reason for that is the Garden is attraction driven, like most major markets. The Garden may be more so than any other. Attraction driven, meaning the fans that come to the Garden want to see what they perceive to be legitimate superstars.
Yep.
Austin and Rock filled that bill.
No doubt. Let's talk about the next match here. Filled with Hall of Famers, New Age Outlaws in there with the Acolytes. They only get 2 minutes and 35 seconds. Meltzer would say total rush job. Acolytes hit their winning moves immediately, and referee Tim White was pulled out of the ring when Farouk had Road Dogg pinned. X-Pac does a run in when the ref isn't looking, gives Bradshaw a spinning heel kick, and Billy Gunn pins him with the famouser dud. So you've got, the New Age Outlaws are over like nobody's business. The Acolytes at this point are well-established badasses. I mean, in real life and on screen, but they only get 2 minutes and 35 seconds. A real rush job here. Why so quick? Did you guys think that you had too much on this card? I mean, the three-way IC only gets 7 minutes. The tag tables only gets 10 minutes. Taz and Angle only get 3 minutes. It feels like there's just way too much stuff, because some of these matches just aren't given any time. Overbooked
card, trying to get everybody that we could on it, which I find ironic, because you got a zillion folks in the Royal Rumble match.
Right.
Anybody that needed to be booked could have been booked through the vehicle of the Royal Rumble match, instead of throwing some obligatory matches out there that had no time to develop a story. If you don't have time to develop a story, then why are you doing the match? Why? It's sure as hell. Don't let a promoter tell you, it's because we're benevolent. Bullshit. It was a miscue and it was overbooked. And that's what it was, because when you get to a certain part of the show, you know when you got to be off the air on your satellite time. You know you're drop dead. We got to be off the air blank. And I think knowing what we had coming up, including the Royal Rumble match, including Triple H and Mick Foley, that they needed the time to transact their business. The show was overwritten. You get midway through and shit starts getting cut. And these guys are probably lucky they even made air, but they go in, they wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, 2 minutes and 35 seconds. It was the fate was it was going to be deemed a dud by most. And I think the audience would have been very happy if it had been longer, so it got a better story. All good talents, into entertaining, physical, skilled, no time, because they had to make sure they had the time for the Rumble and for Triple H and Foley, for sure.
It's just weird because I feel like, to your point, some of this stuff we could have just the bikini match didn't have to be here, but I understand the placement. But yeah, you could have just taken this tag title match off, but maybe you think you need it. And at this point, people have seen, in hindsight, the Chyna thing not being on here wouldn't have hurt anybody. And it sort of is what it is. But I tell you what, it's all worth it for the next match. It's a street fight for the world title. Triple H defending against Cactus Jack. These guys have feuded for a long, long time. Back in 1997, we would see Mankind go toe to toe with Triple H, and eventually it would build and we would see him take on Dude Love. And then Cactus Jack would debut in Madison Square Garden, the same building, back in 1997. And they're rolling all the way back then, and it continues. But this one really gets heated up on January 3rd on Monday Night Raw. Triple H wins the world title from Big Show and mocks Foley with an impersonator. A week later, The Rock brings every superstar to the ring and demands that Foley be reinstated, or the entire roster would walk out. Foley was reinstated, and he requests a street fight. Foley and Triple H are in a 4-on-4 tag match later that night. Triple H would pin Foley after using the ring bell and delivering a couple of pedigrees. And after the match, Foley takes his mask off and attacks Triple H. That week on SmackDown, Foley returns to his Cactus Jack persona and takes off the Mankind attire to reveal the Cactus Jack look. And now we're here, and they get plenty of time, 26 minutes and 51 seconds. I gotta say, and I'm sure some will disagree, I think this is the best match Triple H ever had. It is, maybe not the most talked about match that Foley had in the company because of, the King of the Ring from 98, but this is great shit, man. And if you're going to watch one thing from the network on the old school stuff that we're going to cover on all my podcasts this week, this is the match. Meltzer gave it 4.5 stars. I'd give it 5. I absolutely loved it. Even Meltzer said, this is an excellent and dramatic brawl. Helmsley delivered a hard chair, and then they were off to the races. I mean, big bumps all over the place, lots of violence, but lots of psychology too, telling a hell of a story. I thought it was tremendous, and they're doing everything. I mean, tables and chairs and thumbtacks.
They had a real street fight.
Yeah.
They used shit. They used their fists. They used their feet. They struck a lot. There was dramatic use of blood, that was accentuated the drama of the moment. You got two guys that had great chemistry together. They respected one another, and they were both unselfish in that respect. Mick knew that Triple H was on his roll, was his ascending to the top, and to stay there, to get there. He's still in his journey, but once he got there, he stayed still there, which is great. But Mick Foley certainly helped make Triple H the star that it is today, with some of the performances that he provided Triple H in the matches that they had. And to his credit, this series of matches really we were able to take Triple H out of that Greenwich snob, hoity-toity guy, that this son of a bitch is tough. He's a cerebral assassin. Somebody gave him that nickname. I can't remember who that guy was, but the cerebral assassin became a tough guy as a result of his performances with Mick Foley. And I think that's everlasting. And that's exactly where his image is today.
Really go out of your way to watch this one. Remarkable. And there is something I want to bring up in here because they're going to use barbed wire. There's a barbed wire wrap 2x4. And it wasn't that long ago, maybe just a couple of weeks prior to this, that the Athletic Commission would not allow ECW to use barbed wire. Of course, here the WWF is using it. It's always felt like if you were an ECW loyalist, there were sort of two sets of rules. And I would think as a business guy, a lot of that's just driven by the revenue. You know, you're going to have to pay more if you're the WWF because your fees are based on your attendance and tickets sold and your gate. So maybe they're willing to overlook some stuff if you're paying a little more, or was this more, you know, theater and you guys were using rubber tip barbed wire? What was the story?
I think WWE had the clout and the money talks. And you know, WWE had a guy there for many years. He was a judge in upstate New York named Rich Herring. And Rich Herring had a real strong relationship to the New York State Athletic Commission and many of its members, because Rich had been around boxing and stuff for years. And you know, that we always called him the judge because he was, like I said, a judge in upstate New York who worked part-time as a judge and would commute down to Stamford to the office. I think Rich had positive interactions to get that done. But boy, it added so much. It was done the right way. It was done at the right time. It had amazing drama. And that was, those guys wanted to make sure that when you left the Garden that night, you weren't just talking about who won the Rumble. You're talking about that goddamn street fight was amazing. And it was. It was as good a street fight as I think I've ever called, to be honest with you. And I called a lot of big bloodbaths in the Mid-South, UWF, WCW, lots of them. None of them had the drama that I could, because again, the facility, the venue, it's a Garden. And Triple H growing up in New Hampshire and Mick growing up in Long Island, the Garden was the destination for the WWF that they followed when they were kids. They were there, man. They were there in a main event level match before 19,000 plus with all the whistles and bells and toys that they needed, and they delivered.
Let's talk about the Garden and the significance to Foley. I mean, this is something that even when he was a fan was a special building. Did you ever have conversations with Foley about what it meant to be in, you know, sort of world title matches like this and big moments at the Garden?
Absolutely. You know, Mick is my guy. We know the story of me having to convince McMahon that let's give him a chance. And Vince saying, I'm going to acquiesce to you, JR, because of your position. And I want you to know what it's like to get your heart broken when a talent that you love, that you have a big emotional investment in, maybe not objective really to the matter that you should be. You need to know what it feels like to have your heart broken. And I believe this guy's going to break your heart. I never even thought of that. I never thought of anything but success for Mick, because upon talking to Mick over the years, even before either one of us got to WWE, we were both in WCW. You know, my goal was no different than his. I wanted to broadcast from the Garden. I wanted to sit in that world's most famous arena and do my thing. And so did he. And it was never lost on either of us. But for Mick, after hitchhiking and, you know, getting a ride to the Garden or whatever over his teenage years, he was there for Snuka and Morocco, jumping off the top of the cell. The pictures showed Mick in the audience. It was just it was a dream. It was almost too good to be true. It's almost like it was booked by a screenwriter or something. It couldn't be this real, but it was that real. It meant that much to him. And as far as Hunter's concerned, he's a Kowalski guy, and he grew up in the Northeast. And any wrestling fan that grows up in the Northeast is a WWF guy originally, and as it morphed on through. But the Garden was the destination, to make no mistake about it. So both these guys are in these high-level matches at this major pay-per-view before a 19,000 plus sold out, over $1 million gate, and a lot of them came to see that match. So I think both of them are on. Were gassed to the max on that night as far as emotion and enthusiasm.
Let's talk about our main event, man. The Rock is the man. We know that coming in. He is the biggest star on the entire roster at this point, especially with Stone Cold on the shelf, and New York loves him. Everything he does, they're hanging on, his every word. As you said, they come out to see the big stars, and there's a lot of talent here on this one. First out is D'Lo Brown. Next up is Grandmaster Sexay. Then we've got Mosh from the Headbangers, and we've got Christian out at number 4. Then Rikishi out at number 5. Scotty 2 Hotty at 6. Steve Blackman at 7. Viscera at 8. Big Boss Man at 9. Test at 10. The British Bulldog at 11. Gangrel at 12. Edge at 13. Bob Backlund at 14 here at MSG.
Yeah.
Chris Jericho at 15. Crash Holly at 16. Chyna at 17. Farouk at 18. Road Dogg at 19. Al Snow at 20. Val Venus at 21. Prince Albert at 22. Hardcore Holly at 23. The Rock is going to come in at number 24. And then Billy Gunn is 25. Big Show is 26. Bradshaw is 27. Kane is 28. The Godfather is 29. And X-Pac draws number 30. This is an interesting Rumble because it feels like there's a lot of talent on here, but it doesn't feel like it's as star-studded as some other ones in the past. Mm-hmm. A lot of guys are pulling double duty, and really sticks out like a sore thumb how many of these guys are no longer with us. Of course, we've lost Grandmaster Sexay, we've lost Viscera, we've lost Big Boss Man, we've lost Test, we've lost the British Bulldog, we've lost Chyna, we've lost Crash Holly. There's a lot of these guys who are no longer with us, and this wasn't all that long ago. When you watch this one back for the first time in a long time, what really stood out to you?
Well, I had some mixed emotions, quite frankly, to be honest with you. I enjoyed going back and watching the show for the first time since January of 2000, since we did it live. The only other time I saw clips of it were when they were in packages that we're using to build something else subsequently after the Royal Rumble. But it's sad. There are sad moments in that, especially seeing a smiling, bright-eyed talent coming to the ring, living a dream, and knowing that they're no longer with us. It's just not easy to digest. And you wish there was something you wish it wasn't that way, but it was. But the reality of life is what it is. So, but this show was built around The Rock. Austin gone, The Rock had to be featured, and I thought we did a nice job. And of course, Dwayne did a great job of running with the opportunity to get over more. And he certainly did that on that night, I thought.
One of the other guys that you really spend a lot of time making is Rikishi. And, he's a big fella. He's in there 16 minutes and 23 seconds, but he has 7 eliminations. And when it's time for him to actually get eliminated, it takes Big Boss Man, Bob Backlund, Edge, Gangrel, Test, and the British Bulldog. So you're really making Rikishi here for the year 2000. Why was Vince so high on Rikishi here at Rumble 2000?
Vince was sold on the family. The Samoan lineage was something that Vince believed in, as we all did at that point in time. Junior size was Junior Fatu was his size was extraordinary. He had a very what Stink Face was unique, and got over. He was getting over. Great smile. It's a long way from being the Sultan. Junior Fatu always had the great skills. He's still a great teacher. But then one of his sons, I've been watching on the Indies, or not the Indies. I think he's with MLW. Goddamn, he's a hand. He's really good. So I don't know, just the size, agility. He'd paid his dues. He was a loyal dude. A lot of reasons. And I think all of them were valid, quite frankly. I didn't like the Rikishi running over Austin angle because, quite honestly, and maybe in today's market, the reality of a neck injury is would have been enough, and build it that way. But we're still in that era where no matter what you do, you got to promote and, more importantly, protect your top baby faces. That's why baby faces rarely in that era lost by submission. It happened, not often, but that was a whole different mindset, different philosophy that's utilized today. But Vince liked Rikishi. Junior Fatu is hard not to like, and he's a good dude. And I just thought that his time had come, and Vince thought it was going to be there was money there, and it just was one of those deals. And quite frankly, he did all right. I always thought that Junior's best when Junior was in the WCW in a tag with Samu. I really loved that combination. I thought they were really, really special. So, but nonetheless, Vince thought there was something there, and I appreciate this from Vince that he helped Junior with that break, as you were, because he felt he had deserved it and had earned it, and that was all I needed to hear. Plus, I like the guy.
It's interesting because usually someone is the quote unquote Iron Man and shows off how long they can stay in this one. The Iron Man in this one is Test. He goes 26 minutes and 16 seconds. And I think this is the first Rumble since like 89 where no one lasted for more than 30 minutes. Of course, the story that they're trying to tell is well established. Meltzer even complimented that. He said, you could see a lot of thought was put into the booking as far as who came in, when, and when the eliminations were to take place. This accomplished its goal, but seemed to drag at many points and almost came across as simply a series of lengthy ring entrances. When you saw this one back, what did you think of this Rumble? Where does this stack up as a Rumble match? Not the Rumble pay-per-view as a whole, this match in particular.
Well, I didn't have any issues with it. I thought it was fine. I really did. Every Rumble, including this year's Rumble, with Lesnar coming out number one, is a different story. Different timing, different participants coming in at different times, being asked to do different things. So they all got their own story. But the fact that they backloaded this thing where a guy could come in and make an impression, and I don't have that right in front of me how many guys were eliminated by certain individuals, but there were some guys that had, like you said earlier about Fatu. I think, would you say he eliminated 7 people? But there are other guys that eliminated multiple people as well. So I didn't have a problem with it, Conrad. I thought it was okay. Like I said, the issue there was, what do we do to protect The Rock? Because Stone Cold's laying laying down in the hospital bed in San Antonio. How do we get the great one to become even greater in perception and position on the card? We knew that if we just gave him being Dwayne, the platform, that he would run with the ball and kick ass. And he did. He did time and time again. So that's what I thought about it. It was a Royal Rumble where some guys that were unsung could maximize their minutes, maybe turn a head or two, but it was for The Rock to continue to take another step upward.
We should mention that the final 4 come down to X-Pac, Kane, Big Show, and Rock. X-Pac, it looks like he's eliminated. I guess he is actually, but the referee doesn't see it. So he slips back in, nails Kane with a spinning heel kick, and eliminates him. So now we're down to 3. X-Pac gives Big Show the Bronco Buster. Show doesn't sell that at all. Then he presses X-Pac over his head, dumps him out in front of the ref. So now we're down to our final 2. And eventually The Rock gets Big Show down, gives him the people's elbow. Crowd goes nuts for that. He's coming back though with a choke slam. He's going to throw The Rock over, but Rock grabs the top rope to avoid his foot hitting the floor. And then Show goes all the way over. And Meltzer would say they got you ready for this finish by showing you the Bulldog Shawn Michaels finish where they were the last 2 and Michaels was thrown out, but both feet didn't touch the floor. He comes back in and wins. afterwards, of course, Show would attack Rock and throw Rock over the top rope. But by this point, he's already won 2 3/4 stars. What'd you think of the finish? You know, we managed to get the people's elbow in and try to tell a story along the way.
We accomplished everything that we needed to accomplish at the end of the match. The Rock standing tall, overcoming the odds, avoiding the biggest challenge physically in the company, in the Big Show. We accomplished what we needed to accomplish. Now, again, everything's subjective. It may not have been the best Rumble. You know, you mentioned that. I didn't think it was a bad Rumble. You didn't say that either, by the way.
No.
But again, what was your goal, guys, to writing this show? Pat Patterson did the lion's share of the work when formatting the Rumble. That was his creation.
I mean, as far as even here, is he formatting entrances and exits?
I think he's probably formatting the order of entry and the order of out. Yeah. I can't remember when that was responsibility was largely taken off of him, but I know that for many years
it was his.
It was him and Bruce.
Right. And
Bruce would kind of keep the records and make sure Pat stayed focused. But largely the vision of who came out when and how you'd accumulate so many guys, that you'd have a big star come in, make an impact by eliminating several guys. And I think that's probably what's going to happen this year with Lesnar. You load it up, Lesnar unloads it. You load it up, Lesnar unloads it. Then you take care of your business at the end. And so Patterson was brilliant at that. And to Bruce's credit, he and Pat worked very, very well together in that era. And the Royal Rumble was one of their big projects. I think they ate a lot of hot dogs at Swanky Frank's when they were supposed to be working. I kidded them about that deal, but of course you're in the creative vein. You can be creating anywhere you are, even eating a grilled hot dog at Swanky Frank's in Norwalk.
The timing of the entrances is something that's been debated a lot. I think they're calling it, or it's been nicknamed Titan Time. Meltzer says, it was said ahead of time that it would be 1 minute between entrances, but it was ranging from 1.5 minutes to about 1:50. So it was clear they were playing this one by ear. Who do you think is sending guys? Is that Bruce on a headset in the back?
Yeah, it's grill position. And everything's going to be based on how much time is left in the show to finish our business. So it's just a simple matter of mathematics. But as we said earlier, in my opinion, the show was a little bit overwritten in as much as that we had too much show that resulted in some very short matches for no obvious reason other than the show was just mistimed. Too much. So that's kind of how I look at that. It just was too much. And again, the issue is real simple here. What was your goal? The goal was to get The Rock over. Was that accomplished? I believe it was. So therefore, mission accomplished. And whether it was artistic success or I didn't like that, this guy came in too early, this guy came in too late. Okay, fine. That's your prerogative. But the goal was to get The Rock over and his hand raised, and that's exactly what we did. And I thought in fine fashion.
Really, really good stuff. We should mention that the fallout from this show, we are going to see a rematch at No Way Out with Cactus Jack and Triple H, and we know what the stakes are going to be. It's a retirement stipulation that only lasts 2 months, and then Cactus is back at WrestleMania, and he's written about that he wishes he had that one back. Overall, though, you know, when this show is said and done, what'd you think? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle?
No, I thought it was a thumbs up. For that night of entertainment, considering the venue, the crowd, the spontaneity, the surprises, Tazz's pop, big surprise, you know, the Rumble match where Rock comes in the mid-20s and I guess a very strong competition, dodges all the bullets, including the big cannon shot by Big Show. I thought that would give it a win for me, notwithstanding the unbelievable street fight between Triple H and Mick Foley. I thought was, again, you know, if I go back and if I did a DVD of JR's favorite top 10 matches or top 20 matches in his 26-year career in WWE, the Triple H Mick Foley match would definitely be included in that. And I have great respect for both men then and now. And I thought that they did above and beyond. They dropped blood. They lost blood. They lost their DNA proof that they had a fight. And I loved it. It wasn't one of the situations where you got 6 guys standing on the outside of the ring waiting for somebody to cannonball over the top rope, and you're stupid enough to stand there and catch them. Are you shitting me? Where did this come from? So, but that wasn't that deal. This is a real fight. Or at least, of course, it looked like a real fight, which is all that matters.
Yeah, it's so real that at one point Triple H takes a bump on the stairs, and to use a wrestling term, his leg was lacerated. Like, he's bleeding from the calf to the point that he needs stitches. And when he shows up on Raw the next night, you have commentary, as he shows up with a bandage on his head, said that he had to get stitches in his head and on his calf. And, of course, as him and Cactus Jack are doing a promo, he's like, if I were you, I wouldn't want to face me again either. And of course, we know what we're going to set up towards. Raw the next night would have a main event with Rock and Rikishi on one side. That shows you what they're doing with Rikishi. He's in the Raw main event against Big Show and Triple H. And that show, even though that may not sound like, oh, that's a main event I want to see, it gets a 6.8 rating. Man, people would stab their mom to have a 6.8 rating.
I think it's that Southern announcing.
Yes, there you go.
Lawler, JR, those 2 goddamn old decrepit hillbillies, they must have done something right. But no, it's all about the talent. And the show is hot. Remember, it's following the Royal Rumble, which was hugely publicized, got a lot of buzz, and it just was, I didn't know we'd do that good, but a 6.8 rating, are you kidding me? Can you imagine the celebrations that would be had today if Raw got a 6.8 or AEW got a 6.8 or anybody in the world at SmackDown got a 6.8? My buddy Jacob Ullman at Fox would be doing cartwheels. Tony Khan would be having a celebration. 6.8 ain't given away, and that's an accomplishment. And so I just thought we were hot right then. And look, Conrad, you can't discount how important The Rock was to us. I'm not giving him all the credit. That would not be fair because he never went out there and had great matches by himself.
Right.
This is not an a cappella business, but by having him and him being unencumbered by Austin,
right.
Him having the sole focus on him and being able to groom him and build him and let him grow and elevate was amazing timing. It was almost like Steve's surgery was serious, obviously, and we all stood on our edge of our seats. I made many trips to San Antonio to make sure he was okay because, he needed reassuring too, that things are going to be all right. And they were. He got some more time. But having The Rock there was so massive in 2000 for WWE. It just speaks to the fact that you had the greatest box office sensation in history having neck surgery. And we didn't miss a beat at the box office with Dwayne Johnson carrying the ball.
Let's get to Twitter. We got lots of questions about this show. We had lots of tweets that said things like, this is my favorite show ever. This is my first Royal Rumble I remember. Derek T. Lewis even wrote, I was in the crowd that night. Are there any plans for Cactus to win the world title in the street fight against Triple H? I got to tell you, man, that would have felt like a really special moment, would it not? I mean, to have him, because everybody in the crowd by that point, it's well established, remembers, Foley telling the story of hitchhiking to the Garden to see Snuka jump off the cage. To see him win the world title in a street fight like this, they would have blown the roof off the building, huh?
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it would have. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was we were still building Triple H then. So don't think about Triple H in today's as the, big cheese there at WWE working directly under Vince. And someday he'll be running the company. No doubt about that. I got no issues with that whatsoever. If you're wondering if I should knock WWE at this point, I'm not. We haven't knocked WWE in weeks, and we're not going to here. Well, I mean, come on. It's silly.
Yeah.
And we're fans.
Sure.
Anybody. That's why I get pissed about people that have this issue about what are you going to watch on Wednesday night? Well, why don't you look? We got DVR. We got all this other TiVo. We got all this shit. Watch both shows.
Right.
Promote pro wrestling. It doesn't matter what whose banner it's under. Don't be so naive and ignorant. that you think it's a big deal? This is my team. I've watched them since I was 13 years old. Okay. The bottom line is that the WWE is, at that time, we were trying to get new guys over and move them up the ladder to a permanent spot on the upper echelon. With Austin on the sideline, it created a different need for how we book things. And we needed Triple H to elevate to the next level so he could headline cards with The Rock or whomever. So, no, the plan was always for Triple H to win, as far as I remember. And I agree with that to this very day, all these years later.
Interesting question here that we didn't talk about in great detail from Travis. He says, love the show. JR was the voice of my childhood. Approximately how big was the hole in Triple H's leg, and exactly how did he sustain it? From memory, I think it was on the steps, was it not? I
think so too. Yeah, it was significant. It was more of a gash than a slit,
right?
Puncture type thing. As 20 years later, trying to remember a guy's cut. But yeah, it was a serious. And here's the thing: we use that as a way to again illustrate his toughness. He was no longer going to be this elite, smooth, silky technique guy that was a blue blood from Greenwich, blah blah blah. He became the game. He became the cerebral assassin. And with all that said, his work then fit all those monikers. And I thought that he had a defining moment for his character moving forward that night in the Garden to dispel the fact. I'll give you an example or another parallel to that. When Shawn Michaels had a Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker early on, maybe the first one, I'm not sure. It showed that Shawn Michaels was not simply an amazing technique wrestler, a smooth, silky smooth. The little bastard became a tough guy that night because he stood toe to toe with the dead man on many occasions and hung in there. And we pointed that out as well, that we're seeing a different side of Shawn Michaels. Well, we certainly saw a different side of Triple H in my view and in my memory. So it was there was never any other plan but to continue to build him. And, and Mick was at that point too, it wasn't going to kill Mick, yay or nay, if he won the title. If he won the title, it'd be a great thing. But by not winning it, did it kill him? No, not whatsoever.
Let's keep it going here. Big Guns writes, was there anyone openly advocating against the TLC match? This is an era of pushing the limits. Was anyone around to say, hey, this might be too dangerous to set a precedent with a match like this?
Well, the writing team didn't have enough common sense to say that, because if they did, they'd just be guessing. But no, I don't remember any issues with that at all, because look, the Hardys, the Dudleys, Edge and Christian were amazing at that whole process. And it was entertaining. It was physical. It was new. The match was easy to call because it made sense. It was very simplistic on how you won. You disable, you erect the ladder, and you obtain the title or whatever's hanging above the ring. So no, nobody had any issues with it. I never believed at the time that it would be a thing where you'd have TLC pay-per-views, which I still don't think is a good idea.
Sure.
Where you have a tables match, and you have a chair match, and a ladder match, and then you have it all in one deal. It's stupid, bad booking, because you got too much duplicity in what you see in the ring using the same gimmicks. There's only so much you can do with a ladder. But there's things you can do. Don't get me wrong, but there's not a lot you could do that you have never seen before. But the Hardys, the Dudleys, and Edge and Christian, they did all they could to make sure those matches were different and unique. And again, having bookers like, when we had this match here, we had the Hardys and the Dudleys. Well, damn, man, you got Bubba booking his side, you got Matt Hardy booking his side, and it worked.
One of the things that I saw as I'm looking through the questions here on Twitter is about that Triple H leg injury, and Dan Coyle believes that He was suplexed on the wooden pallet, and that's when the leg injury happened. And apparently, on the original Royal Rumble DVD that was released, there's extra footage of Hunter being attended to by the medical staff. So it was pretty serious, as you said.
Yeah, it was a serious puncture. It looked bad, looked ugly. But here's the thing, folks. Decisions that Triple H makes, things he said, he made that comment that I'm sure he regrets about Paige. She may have had children, but she may not remember it. I know he was going for comedy. I know he was trying to be funny, light in the moment, but it was bad timing. I'm sure he regrets it. I'm assuming he does. If he doesn't, then he needs to reevaluate his game plan because he ain't bulletproof. The company ain't bulletproof. But the storm there. Think of this. Think of the pain he was in from his leg, from his getting his body beat on. We take for granted all these. They're working punches. Well, go back and watch this match.
Right.
Look at the things these cats did to each other. They were working, but they were working damn sure stiff and physical. And neither man bitched or moaned. They did it. They did it for the fans. They did it for the goodness of the match. And so again, if you want to go back and watch Mick Foley, maybe at his all-time best, and certainly Triple H at his all-time best in the Cerebral Assassin era, this is the match to go see, man. And if you're a wrestler and you're looking at how can I make my no disqualification / street fight match be more impactful, memorable, you might get some good ideas from watching this one.
Brian Breaker writes, whose idea was it to have Kai and Ty and Mean Street Posse keep doing the run-ins? We didn't really talk about that when we talked about the match, but that was an interesting idea. And I know that Bruce was real high on both of those outfits.
Yeah, me too. I like Kai and Ty. I know Bruce really liked Dick to Go. Obviously a Dick Togo. I'm kidding.
He's still really good friends with Funaki, as far as I know.
Sure. Funaki, the big Green Bay Packer fan who lives in San Antonio, good kid. He's still there, man. We brought Funaki, Taka, Michinoku, Dick Togo, and what's the other guy's name? He was
Men's Teo.
Men's Teo, yeah. Good little group. They all can work. And good guys, never a goddamn peep out of them. They're always at work on time. They were dedicated. They were loyal. They were team players. And of course, the Mean Street Posse they got in because of Shane. They're at legit high school buddies from Greenwich High School. Rodney and Pete Gasparino.
Interesting question from Big Strong Boy. He writes, do you book a Royal Rumble backwards? I don't think I've ever really thought about that, but that probably makes sense, right? You start with the finish in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Any great program, anything you do in that regard, you start at the very top of your card that you perceive to be your main events and work out the finish. And then you protect what's being used in that finish for the rest of the card. That's the idea. Unfortunately, we all have seen it to where you say, well, how many topes, the suicide dive through the second and third rope, how many of those you get in a match? When you got one or two, they stayed special. Talents today don't realize that the dives outside that never beats anybody. Nobody ever dives outside, hits their move, then throws the fellow back in the ring and pins him. That never happens. So all it is a glorified high spot that now is overused. It used to be special when it was used infrequently. It was kept special. It's not that way anymore. So I'm a big believer that the reality of what Foley and Triple H did, they didn't do that stuff. They had their own match, and it worked out very, very well. But I like the Mean Street Posse. Hey, they're good team players. They wanted to learn. They're good guys, and they got over the fact that the boys all knew they were Shane's buddies. They had not, quote unquote, paid their dues. They had not been in territories for years, et cetera, et cetera. But they got over in the locker room because they were men's men. They were athletes, and they worked their ass off. Were they great? I don't know if they were great, but were they additions, positive additions to what we were doing at that time in that role? There was a role for the Mean Street Posse that was not on top, but it was a role, and they filled their role. They played their position, I thought, very well.
Interesting question here that we get all the time that you and I've never really talked about. Randy Orings writes in, what's your opinion of the old simple stages like we see here with a taxi and a street light compared to the bright LEDs today? So the concept being these days, every entrance set is the same, whether it's Raw or SmackDown or whatever, and they utilize the LEDs to sort of dress it up. They had a much different approach here. LEDs aren't really what they are now. And so they had set design. Do you miss that?
No, I've never been a big proponent, Conrad, of the set design. I mean, you're always, when you go and, I saw those set designs for the first time, much more often than not, for the first time when I got in the arena that day. I didn't look at the artwork. It wasn't passed around. They generally want to keep it kind of confidential. But I've never been a big fan of that. I'm a bigger fan of what happens bell to bell. I'm a bigger fan of what in the presentation, overall presentation, but the physical set, you want it to be nice and unique and different, fit the moment, fit the title of the show. But other than that, I was kind of nonplussed by all that stuff. Maybe it's just my age. It just didn't seem like to me it was as big a deal. Now I'll tell you this: a week or so ago, we did Bash at the Beach, right?
Yeah.
At AEW down in Miami. Well, I got texts from people said, I'm going to be very disappointed if there's not sand and palm trees, and they named all these props they needed to have there to make them happy. And I never realized it was that big a deal to some people.
Right.
And of course we came through and it was a nice set, and it did have sand and it had palm trees, and it fit the Miami Vice moment and all those good things. But I never realized fans really had to, they have a dog in that hunt, and it's important to some people. It just was never important to me because I had too much on my plate to worry about or to be concerned or invest much time in the set. When in my role, and not just my role as a talent relations guy, but I had to go out and broadcast this damn thing. So I had to prepare for that. It just was not a high priority for me. So I don't disagree with people that like it. It just was not my thing.
What about surprise entrance in the Royal Rumble? We got lots of questions about that. Caught in the crossfire right in. Who is JR's personal favorite surprise Royal Rumble entrant? It is one of the interesting things that has developed over time with wrestling fans, where everybody sort of fantasy books. Oh, they've only announced 27. Who are those other three going to be?
Uh-huh.
And a few years ago, everybody thought, oh, it's definitely Kenny Omega. And of course we know that's not the case. And here, the big surprise is Bob Backlund. Some may have been disappointed with that, but maybe in a different set of circumstances, if those WCW releases were different, the crowd would have went bananas for an Eddie Guerrero or Chris Benoit here, but it wasn't to pass. Do you have a favorite Royal Rumble entrant where everyone was surprised?
Wow. Good question. I think one time John Cena came back at a Rumble.
Yeah. I think that was 06, and man, everybody went nuts.
Yeah. It was one of the biggest ovations that I'd ever heard for any sport, any athlete, any entrance ever. So that stands out in my mind. But the one we're talking about here with Bobby Backlund.
Oh, wait, my bad. I said 06. It's 08.
Okay. Well, that's all right. But nonetheless, it was still a pretty damn cool surprise.
Absolutely.
And Bob Backlund coming back to the Garden where he once was the king. Right. And there's no make no mistake about it. Look at Mr. Backlund today when you see him or card shows or what have you. Bobby Backlund still loves being Mr. Backlund. He won't sign an autograph, the crazy bastard, unless you can recite the presidents. He must not like to sign autographs. I can't do that either. But Bobby coming back to the Garden, I thought was so organically nostalgic that the guys that had their kids there could say, he was my guy, son. When I was your age, it was Bobby Backlund. And that's true. So I thought the Bobby Backlund thing was good. The misconception was he a shell of his former self because he's been this quote unquote eccentric heel who's wanting to run for office and all these things. But Bob Backlund had it. He earned his chops there, right there in the Garden as the man. He was a Stone Cold, the Hulk Hogan, the Bret Hart. He was everything. He did Bruno. So he was special, and I thought that was pretty cool. But I think the John Cena surprise, which I believe was at the Garden as well.
Yeah, it was. Oh, wait.
Well, was like a Jesus criminy. I mean, it's one of those deals where if you're a smart broadcaster, and we will all want to be, you just lay out. And if Vince or somebody was saying to say something during that entrance, I would have ignored them, because there's nothing I could say. There's nothing Lawler could say that would supersede what we're hearing already. Natural passion from the fans. And I just, it was one of those moments you got to lay out. It's much like the Tazz moment. You know, Tazz had all these regrets, and it's not regrets, it's not a good word. He probably had apprehensions. He's always a little unsteady in that regard. And, you know, he's that way. And now he's at a point where he can laugh about it. But back then it wasn't a laughable matter. But man, when that crowd is going that crazy, there's nothing announcers can really add to it. Lay your ass out. Let me hear it at home, what the audience is feeling in the arena, and then jump in there toward the tail end when the pop starts to fade a little bit. But I've got to think Cena's number one, but the Backlund one was not bad.
Let's talk about the Tazz situation. Lots of questions on our social media. If you haven't already, follow us there at JR Grilling on Twitter, and you can ask a question about next week, which we'll talk about and preview in just a moment. But lots of questions like, hey, why didn't you guys, you know, hype him and his debut on Raw and SmackDown instead of debuting him as a surprise on a pay-per-view? It does stand out as being a little different. And I wonder if part of that was maybe the original idea to have Tazz be a surprise entrant in the Royal Rumble, and can Shamrock be the guy in there with Kurt Angle? And of course we know the Shamrock thing sort of comes to a head this same month, but since we know, you know, hey, he's out with an injury, but he might be coming back. Maybe we can get him back. We're not sure what it is. We'll just leave it sort of empty and give ourselves some options with mystery opponent. Was that considered?
I don't think so. I think it might have been considered it's another option we could have utilized, right. No doubt. But I think the fact that Bobby Backlund had such great history, a great legacy, the foundation was established in a large part in his career in WWE in the Garden, and having those surprises hey, look, they'll have surprises in this year's Royal Rumble, because you got to at least have one or two surprises. You got to have one or two guys that eliminate multiple people. There's things that are formulaic that should not be changed, because, well, we've done that. That's a big thing that some wrestling promoters have screwed themselves, because, well, we've done that. Yeah, it was good, right? Yeah. So why don't you tweak it, put a little different coat of paint on the same application and do that? Well, you know, we want to be different. Well, then you're stupid. There's nothing wrong being different, but don't cut off your nose and fight your face because you're on to something good. So Bobby was a great surprise there. Like I said, the more we talk about it, the more I remember being excited that he was going to be there, because I was very anticipatory regarding what the crowd was going to do. And he got that nostalgic, look who's back. And so they embraced him for a while. Then, of course, he's not the same Bob Backlund. They knew that, you know, back in the day, and all those great matches in the Garden, and the boy face champion, it was a different deal. So I don't know. I think Bobby was a great surprise. Don't think there's any other choice in that deal. The Shamrock thing was a little bit, you know, again, tenuous on both sides. You know, I think Vince had a regard to Kenny. Well, Kenny was doing so well for us, and I know he was in line to make a lot more money. And I know that as he continued to grow his game, he'd be in more main events. Therefore, the money would be there automatically, because you could get paid more if you're in those main events. But, you know, I think Vince's issue with Kenny might have been Vince didn't feel that Kenny was totally committed to WWE as long as he kept talking about the MMA fights. So like I said earlier, we were talking about this, the MMA fights just did not get out of the system of Kenny Shamrock. And that was troubling when you're trying to build a top guy. if we had only had plans to use Kenny Shamrock, part-time Conrad, then him going and fighting and coming back and using Kenny part-time underneath is one thing. But to know that you got a top guy here, that if you got him full-time, you can make a bona fide major main event star out of, that's another issue. And the feeling was he loved MMA fighting so much at that time of his life, that he wasn't going to take us to the prom. And so it was better off just to decide not to be available for the prom. And if he gets the fighting out of his system and he's healthy and everything's good, then we might review it later on. But that later on never did really come.
Lots and lots of questions and feedback about Mick Foley taking the pedigree on the thumbtacks. Did anybody try to talk him out of that?
I doubt it. It wouldn't have done any good. If it came down from Vince to veto it, then that's another story. But quite frankly, I don't know if anybody tried to talk Mick out of those things. He was lucky that he had a free reign to do what he thought was applicable in those type matches. And again, here's another thing about that. I talked about how great I thought that Bubba Dudley's booking acumen is then, and still is, by the way, and how much I enjoy his thoughts on the business on Busted Open on Sirius XM channel 153. But you had two guys that had booking abilities, Triple H and Mick Foley. So they're booking their own match. They got an agent. They got somebody that's kind of helping them, navigate. But basically, it's up to them. And who better would you want to work out that match? But those two guys, they're going to do more. They're entertain the audience more. It just works. So I don't think they were vetted or it's sanitized, because what the hell? What else could they have been wanting to do that they didn't do? They both bled like hogs. They beat the shit out of each other with inanimate objects that you can't work with very well. They hurt each other. They pushed the limits. What else could they have left? What do we leave out? What would they have added? I got to say nothing. So they were given full reign on creativity, and that's good. That's why I believe, why do you like this AEW brand? Because we don't have writers, and the talents are obligated to come up with a lot of their own stuff. You think Jericho waits on somebody to give him the marching orders on what he's going to do with John Moxley, or vice versa with Moxley and Jericho? No, that's them being able to be creative and live that creative dream, so to speak, because they know what they can do better than anybody else and do it well. So, no, I think nobody would have said anything about that, Conrad, because we trusted Mick not to go crazy. And that may have been a mistake, quite frankly, because Mick always took it to the very edge, man. And because he loved what he was doing as so much. And sometimes that could be the old blessing, or it could be a curse.
The original creative for WrestleMania, with Austin involved, would have been different. What would he have done at Royal Rumble if you think he was a gamer here and he was available?
Who's that now?
If Austin was in this Royal Rumble,
oh my God!
If he wasn't sidelined, how would the show have been different, do you think?
Well, he would have been. He'd probably won the Rumble.
Yeah.
You can't bring a guy back from a catastrophic injury and not have success if they're a babyface, for sure. And that would have stopped The Rock's growth.
Yep.
Stop may be too strong. It would have slowed down his growth.
It would have stuttered it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but you don't bring Mickey Mantle back into the lineup and him not hit fourth. He's a cleanup hitter. That's Austin. So, but because you didn't have him, you had another guy that hit pretty good power and clear the bases and do his thing, and batting fourth in the lineup, and that's the great one. So we were very lucky we had both those guys there. And I think that's probably one of our stellar moments in talent relations that, can you imagine not having anybody ready or not having talents recruited, signed, and trained and in place in case somebody went down? What if we had not had The Rock?
Right.
What if? That's serious. That's a major question, and one that I'm very, very happy that we don't have to answer.
Well, there's lots of what ifs about next week's show. And as much as I enjoyed Royal Rumble 2000, I think I enjoy the garnish around Royal Rumble 2005 even better. That's what we're doing next week right here. It went down on January 30th, 2005. So we're right at the 15-year anniversary. And next week we'll be back at you on the exact 15-year anniversary of that show from Fresno, California. You may remember this is the Royal Rumble where they had all of the WWE superstars do a little commercial as if it was West Side Story, which is just tremendous. This is also the show where we would see Edge and Shawn Michaels in the singles match. Unbelievably, The Undertaker is wrestling Heidenreich here in a casket match. A triple threat with JBL, Big Show, and Kurt Angle for the WWE title. Triple H and Randy Orton for the World Heavyweight Championship. But the main event is all about the 30-man Royal Rumble match, and things don't go exactly as planned for anyone. It comes down to John Cena and Batista, and they have to call it, and it brings the chairman of the board down, and somehow, and this sounds make believe, he tears not one, but both of his quads and still tries to walk on. What a fucking story. So much to unpack next week. And there's so much talent in this particular Royal Rumble. The first two guys in the thing are Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, two guys we spent a lot of time talking about today. Stay tuned next week and every week right here on Grill and JR on Westwood One. Tell your friends, if you haven't already, to hit the subscribe button. Leave us a 5-star review if you think we've earned it. And we'll see you next week right here on Grill and JR with the voice of wrestling, Jim Ross. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what adfreeshows.com is all about. Get early ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-free shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. And you want to talk about early? You can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered, that adfreeshows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today, and hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. adfreeshows.com.